British cavers have recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of the 1972 expedition to Ghar Parau, Iran, which not only discovered and explored the deepest cave in Asia, but also accumulated enough money to start up a charitable foundation which has supported many other expeditions. About half the cavers who went to Iran were members of the Craven Pothole Club, and on returning, we began to think about organising an expedition to Yugoslavia, or more accurately, Slovenia, which has around 6,000 known and explored caves and claims to have the world's oldest tourist cave, going back as far as 1633. The word karst, which is used to describe certain geomorphological features, is derived from the Slovenian word kras. Today, the scientific exploration of caves is known as speleology. Our expedition to communist-controlled Yugoslavia was able to go ahead thanks to Dr. Stephen Craven, who'd been an important member of the Iran expedition. Stephen had recently visited the famous Postojna Cave, and a few months later, he contacted someone at the Karst Research Institute in Postojna. To our surprise, the authorities granted permission for our visit during the first week of August 1973. We were actually away from the 27th of July to the 11th of August. The team comprised John Allenby, Clive Green and myself, all fresh back from Iran, Dave Allanach, Barry Andrew, or Baz, and his friend Sid. Baz had a Land Rover and kindly offered to transport everyone and our gear across Europe. Sid was a qualified mechanic based in West Didsbury. Here we are at Dover, embarking on the ferry crossing to Calais. The Land Rover was a cheap and cheerful way of getting to Yugoslavia, although quite uncomfortable to be sitting there hour after hour on the road. This map shows the routes we took across France, then into Germany. Here's a view of industrial activity on the fringe of Frankfurt. We cooked stews each night in a huge washing up bowl, then slept out in the open air at the side of the road. Our route went south to Munich, where just a few months earlier, the Black September terrorists had captured and massacred Israeli athletes at the 1972 Olympic Games. We naturally had to stop for a beer, and we also took the opportunity of visiting the famous Science Museum, which is the largest of this kind in the world, currently with over 28,000 objects on display. The next day, we drove across the border into Austria and really felt to be entering the Alpine region. On the way, we paused to visit the famous Eisriesenwelt cave, about 40 kilometers south of Salzburg. This is a show cave and was reached by a cable car following a walkway across a near vertical cliff face. This image is from Wikipedia and shows what it's like in the early springtime when snow can come crashing down on tourists, hence there's a roof over the walkway. A red circle identifies the entrance, which is much bigger in fact than it looks here. It so happened we were visiting on a glorious sunny day, as you can see from the t-shirts, although within a few minutes of reaching the cave entrance, we were feeling quite cold because of the breeze blowing through over the ice sheets inside the cave. Here's another image courtesy of Wikipedia, looking back from inside the cave entrance. The Eisriesenwelt is the largest ice cave in the world, extending for over 30 miles. This survey only shows the tourist part of the cave. Here's a picture from Dr. Tony Waltham's book, Great Caves of the World, which was published in 2008. At the time of our visit in 1973, my friend Dave described the interior as expanses of blue-green ice step upwards through two massive halls roofed in pink limestone. After our trip into the cave, we drove further south over the Katschberg pass through Villach. The scenery here was quite spectacular. It was dark by the time we made camp and had a hasty meal before bedding down for the night. We woke the next morning to warm sunshine, birdsong, and a vision of soaring mountain peaks. You can see how we'd pulled off the main road the night before onto a forest track and just slept at the side of the Land Rover. It was as if though we'd gone to heaven. The scenery was so spectacular. Back then I was on a tight budget and didn't take too many slides, but this is the best I can do. It's an image from a calendar. A few hours later, we reached Trieste and entered into the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, of which Slovenia was the most liberal communist state in Europe. This might explain why British passports were accepted without too much hassle. However, the border police found a problem with my US passport. They asked me to get out of the Land Rover, and after a short interview, they opened up the barrier and we drove on into Slovenia. Our first priority was to check in with the Karst Research Institute in Postojna. As you can see, this was a rather grand building. We delivered valuable documents smuggled across Europe, photographs and drawings of our gaping gill winch. We then fled further south to the Adriatic coast. I have a vague memory of seeing Russian oil tankers anchored off the shoreline. After days of being confined inside a bumpy Land Rover, we were ready to relax on the Adriatic coast and enjoy the sunshine. We set up camp on a rocky headland near Crikvaja. Next day, we drove further south along the coast road, then inland to visit Plivis National Park, situated in Croatia, although at that time it was still part of Yugoslavia. On the way, we came across many rural scenes of a simpler and slower pace of life. The exceptional natural beauty of the Plivis Lakes was recognized as early as 1949, when it became the first national park in the Republic of Croatia. Several streams and rivers flowing over the limestone have left tufa deposits with attractive lakes and waterfalls, which certainly brought to mind Conan Doyle's mysterious Lost World. Plivis Lakes were recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979. The spectacular image on the left side is taken from a tourist brochure, whereas the image on the right is one of my own. We drove back to the campsite in the evening sunshine. Next morning, we headed northwest for what would be one of the highlights of our trip. The Karst Research Institute had arranged a trip to the amazing Krisna Jama cave. Back then, access was strictly controlled and only for competent cavers. To quote from Great Caves of the World, beyond the first few boulder-strewn chambers, the passage shrinks down to a clean-washed, well-rounded tunnel about 8 meters in diameter and half full of water. More recently, the cave has been opened up for tourist trips lasting 1 hour, marked with the red dot that you can see on the survey, and 4-hour trips which take people as far as a stalactite barrier known as Calvary, and that's marked by a green dot. And then there's a 7-hour trip ending at the 20th lake. The cave actually extends for about 5 miles. Dave took this black and white image showing the impressive dimensions of the cave passage, which are much larger than we'd been used to in the Yorkshire Dales. Dave had our support by the rest of us holding flash bulbs and setting them off together when he required it. We entered with a group of Belgian cavers who were using flat-bottom boats to navigate the lakes. But by contrast, we Brits were wearing wetsuits and we quickly overtook the Belgians just by wading and swimming. These next 3 colour images are quite recent and can be credited to Peter Godie from the calendar Underground Worlds 2019 by Wild Places Publishing. As you can see, these lakes have an amazing turquoise glow because of the limestone sediments which are caught by underwater flashbulbs. Of course, the cave only looks like this for a split second while the flashbulbs are going off, and then we revert to pitch blackness, broken only by individual headlamps. This wonderful image was taken by Andreas Schober and Gaspard Maragos. Again, this was published in the Wild Places calendar. After 13 lakes, we reached the Chamber of Calvary, which is decorated with a fabulous array of tall, thin stalagmites. Here the river pours over a rim of what's known as a Ghar Pool. Here's another one of Dave's photos looking back from the other side of the calcite formations. From here, the character of the cave changes quite a lot, with dry sections, then deep pools. We explored the further reaches, including Krisna Gora, the Crystal Mountain that is, by climbing up 100 feet of vertical, almost collapsing rubble. The roof and the walls were out of sight as we wandered across its irregular floor. Back out on the surface, in such a mild climate, we were quite happy to continue sleeping out under the stars, although you can see we did have at least one tent. In the evenings, we had to make our own entertainment, and on reflection, some of our antics could easily have ended in disaster. Our next day of caving was to the nearby Postojna Jama cave, which is a show cave with a worldwide reputation. Postojna is part of a system that includes 4 other caves with a total length of nearly 15 miles. As you can see from the tourist leaflet, the cave is inhabited by blind white salamanders. Over on the right, you can see our caving group, and there's a bloke in a red shirt who's photo bombing at one side. The trip into the Postojna Cave begins with a journey on an electric train, leaving a platform similar to those in London's Underground, with artificial tunnels leading to the proper natural cave. Chamber follows chamber, all sooty black, a grim reminder of struggles in the last war when occupying German troops used the cave as a fuel dump. As can be seen from this survey, the Pikva River is a long way from the tourist entrance. Eventually, though, we disembarked in a massive chamber known as the Dancing Hall, and this picture and the next two were taken by Dave. Some of the chambers are really impressive. This image shows what can happen when flash bulbs don't all go off at the same time. It's giving the illusion that you can see straight through the person who's standing there if you look carefully. Well, we practically ran along all the passages for about a mile in order to reach the lower active section of the Pikva River. Just as we were about to plunge into the river, our guide warned of dead pigs and sewage. Well, since discretion is the better part of valor, we decided to turn around and walk all the way back to daylight, whilst being careful to dodge passing trains. At last it was time to go home, except the return journey was to be more of an epic than we'd ever imagined. After a tyre blowout, Dave and myself had to hitch a lift with a spare tyre. We had a bad night near Como, being eaten alive by mosquitoes. And then, returning over the Splugen Pass, the Land Rover's near side front wheel accidentally went off the road and very nearly overbalanced the whole vehicle. I remember running out of money and having to go to a Swiss bank. Well, having to go because it was embarrassing to be looking so scruffy and standing on polished marble floors with clean, well-dressed bank staff looking quite bemused. We eventually reached Calais, and there was an all-night drive back to Yorkshire. to Ingleborough, where we were just in time to help with the tackling of Gaping Gill. We were back in God's own county. After the expedition, Dave wrote an amusing account called Yugoslavia This Way, which was published in the 1973 Journal of the Craven Pothole Club, along with some fine black and white photos. Unfortunately, our friend Clive allowed his membership to lapse in 2005, and even more sadly, our friend Barry died in 2019. Well, if ever I'm fortunate enough to visit Slovenia again, there is an old lead mine which has recently been opened up for mountain biking. The mines at Mount Pekka are said to extend for nearly 500 miles, which I find rather hard to believe. But it is possible to cycle more than 3 miles underground from one valley to another with an altitude difference of only about 50 feet. Another option is to go kayaking through the now flooded mine workings at Mesya. The flooded passages are reached by a train ride along a mile-long tunnel. So that was the Craven Pothole Club's one and only expedition to Yugoslavia. Just getting there and back was an adventure in itself. And today, with cheap flights and modern caving techniques, I expect Slovenia would make an excellent destination for a caving holiday. Thank you for watching.